Okay guys, so we're going to get into the fan installation on the van. So when you get your kit, it's going to come in a big pallet with all the other boxes. You'll find this box. This is going to be your roof vent, the Max Air fan, and it's going to be boxed up with all the components that you need for the install. So we'll open it up here. You can kind of see what's inside. This comes from Max Air itself. This is going to be user manual, remote control, and some hardware specifically for the fan and butt connectors for the wiring. So that's in this little box. You can set that aside for now. All right, this rooftop trim ring here, I don't know if you can see that, but there's basically a it matches the crown of the roof right here. So it levels out the roof for the fan to sit down on top of. So this is going to be a component that sits on top of the van. All right, and levels all that out. This is the adhesive that we use. All right, so it comes in a tube like this. We're going to use a caulk gun. Get to that later. And then the fan itself here with a couple components. So I'll just undo this. Couple things here. This is the interior fan ring or fan shroud. This is basically the last part of the install here, even after all your ceiling panels are installed. So set this aside, but don't lose it because you're going to need it. You're going to need it kind of right towards the end of the installation. And then this particular fan ring right here, this is what's actually going to sit on top of the roof, on top of this leveling ring right here. And this is what you're actually going to glue down and secure to the roof, and then insert the fan into this. So other than the actual tools for the install, these are the only three components that you need right now. Okay, so we're getting ready to mark the fan hole location for the Transit here. This is going to be the standard rear fan location here. And it's actually kind of nice because in this standard rear location, it's going to go in this bay. You know, we might call it bay number 4, in between these two ceiling ribs here. And it's basically just the right size for the Max Air fan. So we're going to take this fan ring from inside the Max Fan box, all right, and just to kind of make sure you get the mindset right. These tabs, once it's actually up on the roof, are going to be facing out to the sides. So I usually just hold it like that and kind of get used to it. And we're going to go up here, and we're going to actually use this as our guide. Okay, so you're going to take this fan ring from Max Air here, and I'm actually holding it upside down. Meaning that these kind of ribbed things are going to be facing up for this application, but we're really just using this as a guide. So we're going up in this particular fan bay here, or roof bay here, and we're going to put it up in between these ribs, and it's going to fit actually perfectly tight. And even some of this adhesive, this kind of foam adhesive that they use on the ceiling ribs here from Ford, might get in the way. So you might need to kind of just push it back with your fingers or something. You could probably even cut a little bit out if absolutely necessary. But you're just going to kind of push it up there until the fan shroud or fan ring itself is sitting up nice and flush into the ceiling there. All right, and so that basically locks in your front to back alignment for the fan. Side to side, when you get it back up there, you're sort of using the inside edges of these corrugations as your guide. And it also comes really, really close, but there's a little bit of room to slide it back and forth. So you can actually take the fan ring, slide it back and forth until you kind of notice on each side it starts to ramp up with that corrugation there. All right, and then you're just basically finding the center, and it's close enough that you can basically visually center it here. All right, and then once that's in place, all right, you can hold it with one hand, or if you've got somebody helping you out, that can help too. And you're actually going to mark the corners of your fan ring with your Sharpie here. All right, and mark each one of the corners. Okay, one final thing to note is, you know, you guys may have noticed that we took our mark on the inside of this ring, but you know, there's some thickness of the material here, and you have room for error with this flange right here. So the mark that you have on your ceiling, you can go outboard of that mark to either side a little bit, and pretty much right up close to where it starts to ramp up for that corrugation, and that's fine because you have this extra ring around here that's actually sealing up the hole. So it's actually better to go slightly big than go right up to the edge of your mark, because then you might go try to set this in from the top, and you'll notice that the hole is slightly small and it's not wanting to seat down into that hole. So just wanted to make sure I pointed that out for you. Okay, so wanted to go over front fan location for the transit kit. The principles and the installation process are pretty much the same as the rear fan, but the location needs to be found. So the bay that we're going in is in between ceiling ribs number 1 and 2. So not counting the ceiling rib that basically separates the driver's area from the cargo area. Ceiling bay number 1, then number 2, and we're locating the fan kind of towards the back of that particular bay. So just like with the rear fan, you can actually take your interior fan ring and you're running it right up against the flange right here of this ceiling rib. So you're not running over the flange, you're running right up to that edge, and you're marking your corners and centering it up based on the corrugations, just like the aft fan. Mark your corners. You want to basically drill and cut just to the outsides of those, just like we did on the rear fan. Drill your corners, and then you have that location set, and the installation process is exactly the same as the rear fan. Okay, before we get into the drilling, a couple quick notes. You definitely want some eye protection for this. Metal shards in the eyeball are no fun at all. There's a couple different ways you can go about this. You can use a step bit like this one, which is kind of a progressive drill bit. Gets bigger and bigger as you go further in with the drill. You can also drill a pilot hole with a small drill bit, like an 1/8 inch drill bit or something like that, and then open it up. But the point is, you're trying to get a hole that's big enough that you can stick the blade of your jigsaw or whatever other. Just going to be drilling the corners to sort of outline the hole that we're going to be cutting for the fan. So again, eye protection, and you might want to get long sleeves and gloves too. Sometimes the drill bits can make hot metal shards that can kind of burn you a little bit as they fall down. So just be careful of that. Okay, so now that we've got our pilot holes cut for the 4 corners of the hole, we're going to go up to the roof, trace out the outline, and then finish the cut from the top. Okay, so up on the roof, I brought some tools with me here. First things first, I want to deburr these holes that I drilled up from. So I'm going to just use that same step bit and go back down really quick to kind of take the sharp edges off the top here. And that's mostly just so you can kind of keep yourself from catching your hand on it and cutting yourself, and just sort of cleaning up the hole when you lay the tape down. And then I'll probably take one pass with my little deburring tool here. Clean it up. Okay, so now I'm coming in here with my straight edge and I'm lining it up. I kind of already did this with the tape, but the tape can drift off of your straight edge slightly. So I'm kind of double checking it and then marking with a marker as well. It's all either going to be cut away when you make the cut, or it's going to end up being covered up by the fan shroud itself. So don't worry too much about that. The tape going outboard of the holes is to protect the van body where the jigsaw is going to come through, so we don't want to scratch it up with the jigsaw. Okay, so now we're getting ready to go ahead and make the pass through and cut out the fan hole here. So we're going to start at each one of the corners. I'm going to bring the blade basically almost up to each corner, but I'm just going to fall short ever so slightly, just to you don't want to fully cut all the way around and then have one last piece here, because this piece of metal will start wobbling and it'll get hard to cut. So that's the first thing. And then I'm going to have Steve from Elevated Van Works here. He's helping us out with the install today. He's going to get on the underside and just support it. And I'll show you a technique if you're working by yourself to do that as well. So here's another technique you can use. You can actually take your ruler and you can slip it underneath this edge like this to support the the panel as you're making your final cuts. So you can test your fan hole, obviously using the shroud here. You know, it might be a little bit different from one van to the next. For instance, this van, it's a little bit tighter, but it's okay. I mean, it fits into place here. You know, it fits a little bit tighter because those ceiling ribs are right there nice and snug up against the fitment of the fan ring. So it's okay if it fits a little snug. You can go through and make really fine adjustments with a file. And you're going to want to come through and just sort of clean up the edges that you cut with your file anyway once you get done. I should have mentioned this before. If you weren't already wearing gloves, now is a good time to put on some gloves. We're going to go back through and clean the edges of our cut with a file. There can be metal tailings and little shards and stuff like that that can really easily poke you and give you a little metal sliver, which you don't want. So we'll just go through, clean up these edges of any burrs. Okay, and then the final step is to go through and seal up the edge. This is a Loctite metal sealer anti-rust product. We ship this with all of the full conversion kits. If you're just getting a fan kit, it won't be in one of those, but you can use any type of you know, automotive enamel or primer or anything like that, and that will work as well. But we're just going to seal up the edge of the cut to prevent any corrosion or rust. Next thing we can do is actually scuff up just around the edge of the hole with Scotch-Brite. We're just kind of trying to get a little bit rough, give it a little bit better surface for the sealant, the caulking to adhere to. Just basically roughing it up until it kind of takes a little bit of the sheen of the paint away. You don't need to go crazy with this. All right, and we're going to clean up the area. Last step before we put the adhesive in. Clean it up with a little bit of, you know, mineral spirits or denatured alcohol or something like that, just to kind of get any of the contaminants off and out of the way of the paint. Something that evaporates quickly. Okay, so here's the rooftop adapter ring. Again, it's got kind of this pitch that matches the crown of the van. So if you kind of look at it like this, you can see it curve like that. And then on the edges are where it sort of lips back down to kind of fit into these divots of these corrugations here. So it does have a front to back orientation in that respect. So it lays over top of the hole like this. And if it's in there nice and flush, you can't move it really side to side because those lips are holding it in those corrugations like that. So that's kind of how you know you have it set properly over your hole. So just make sure you have your orientation correct, and then remember that. And what we're going to do is set it up with some adhesive here. So you got your caulk gun out right here. It's loaded up. We've cut the tip. And what we're going to do is 3 1/8-inch wide beads of caulk, sort of in succession, starting from the middle and working outward toward the edge of this adapter ring. Okay, so you can see we've got our 3 lines, 3 beads of caulking in there. You know, you can see it got a little messy in some places, but that's okay. It's all gonna end up getting smushed together anyway. So we're gonna transfer it over to the fan hole now. Be careful as you're flipping it back upside down, it doesn't slip out of your hands and then get goop all over the van. And remember, you want it oriented properly so that the crowned, you know, sides of the fan ring are front and back, and it's matching that contour of the van. And then we're gonna lay it down over our hole here and go back through, and you're just gonna kind of progressively apply pressure to it until you start to see it ooze out the edges ever so slightly. And you don't want to press it down so tightly that it pushes all of the adhesive out, and then you have none left underneath. You will want a little bit in there still. All right, and then once it's actually pressed down, I mean, you can feel it. That adhesive is pretty gooey stuff, so it's going to hold the fan ring in place pretty well. Okay, so now we're going to come back through and do the same process with the actual white fan shroud as well. You can see you want this side facing up with these kind of grooves in it. All right, that's facing up when you're applying the caulk, because that's what's going to face down when it actually gets installed on the van. And it's the same principle, three beads of caulking in here. You know, you could kind of goop it on as well, but this is a good way to make sure it's kind of just nice and even, and there's not a bunch of caulk in one place with a bunch, you know, a bunch of thin spots in another place. Okay, so now we've got our caulking down on this as well. Just touched it a little bit there. You can see, again, it kind of, sometimes it's sort of one bead sort of bleeds into the next one, but that's fine. It's all going to end up being smushed together anyway. And then the important thing about this is to make sure that these little floating U-nuts here that actually capture the fan itself, those are facing out to the sides when you place this fan ring down. And again, be careful as you're flipping it over so you don't flip it right down onto yourself, or you know, in the wrong spot on the van and end up getting caulking where you don't want it. And so you can just kind of carefully turn it upside down, fit it into your fan hole. And same thing, kind of sort of progressively move around the edge and press it down until you start to see a little bit of the caulking kind of bleeding out the sides. All right, and then once that's pressed into place, we're just gonna let that dry. Okay, so now that our caulking has set up a little bit between each one of these layers, we're gonna come back through and we're gonna put a little small, like 1/8 inch bead around the edge of the white ring, as well as the edge of the black trim ring down here, and just basically do a little fillet. So if you cut your caulk tube at an angle, it actually allows you to make a nice clean line. It just sort of comes out of the tube nicely and sets a nice even bead. And if not, no big deal. Come through with a gloved finger and just kind of stick your finger down in there and smear it. And it makes just a nice little fillet around the edge. All right, so I did the bottom ring where it meets up with the van. I'm gonna go back through around and do the top ring, so where the white meets the black ring. All right, and now I'm gonna go back through and plug all of the screw holes with some sealant as well. Okay, next step is I screwed up a couple spots, so I'm just gonna go back through with a gloved finger, kind of smooth it all out and make a nice, nice consistent bead. All right, so we're going to finish up the fan install here. There's a couple different types of hardware that come in the bag with the fan. A few different screws for if you were going to use the screws to go through the roof. And then there's some screws for the finishing ring on the inside. And then there's screws to actually install the fan into these floating clips here. There's two types of screws that look really similar. And I don't know if you can see that. There's this one and this one, very, very similar. The longer, thinner ones are the ones that would have gone through the roof. These sort of shorter, fatter stainless steel ones with the kind of rounded head. Those, there's 4 of those, and those are going into these U-nuts here to capture the fan. So we're going to take our fan and we're going to open the hood up. So go to this dial here, turn it counterclockwise. Open that up, and that's going to give us access to the mounting holes where the screws go through. And then before you set it in there, kind of go through to these clips and just make sure that the holes through the framework are clear. Sometimes these clips are kind of popped halfway up or popped halfway down. You go to set it in there, you can't get the screw to start, and it's a super pain in the butt. And then we're going to pull our wiring out. It's got our butt connectors on there ready to connect to our wiring. Turn it around so kind of the opening, I guess, is facing backwards. Drop the wiring down through the hole and then slip the fan in there. So the fan kind of, I guess, screen on the inside goes through the hole, and then the outside part, the very outer diameter, goes over this opening here and then over those floating U-nuts. And then drop it in like that. And then you sometimes have to push down a little bit or pull it up slightly to sort of look through those holes and kind of get a sight picture of through that U-nut there so you can start your screw. And sometimes the punch comes in handy here too. If you see the hole just barely starting to show, stick the punch through here and line it up. And you can press down on this very slightly, but you don't want to press hard at all. So if you have to press down, use that little edge on the side or something. And sometimes if you're having trouble getting these U-nuts to line up, if you put the fan on there and you're like one's giving you trouble, you can actually stick your pin back through there and pull up on it and raise the hole up. Usually that's like the problem, is it's seated a little too far down. Okay, so the 4 mounting screws are in there. Last but not least, just pull the wrapping off and then you're done. Okay, we're gonna go in here and connect our fan here. So the fan from our kit comes ready to go with 2 heat shrink butt connectors here. One thing to pay attention to, the wiring that's attached to the fan, black is positive and white is negative on this. So it's a little bit weird because black is negative on our harness. So you go a little bit out of the ordinary there. So we'll do the positive connection first here. So it's going to go black to red in this case, and then white to black. Okay, and then we're going to heat shrink these and we'll be done.